Reading through some of the comments that have been left on the Passion Life social media pages yesterday, I was not surprised to come across some, shall we say, passionately contrarian comments left by those who oppose the idea of advocating for life in the womb. We leave those responses on our social media on purpose. We leave them there for people to read, unless they are violent or vulgar, which sometimes they are, in which case we remove them just because they're not adding anything constructive to the conversation. But usually we leave those responses because they kind of expose a lack of sound reasoning, or they expose the vitriol that motivates a lot of abortion advocacy. One such dissatisfied customer responded by referencing a story that was in the news media about 2 weeks ago. You may have read the article. The story was about 5 Texas women who were suing the state of Texas to clarify laws about exceptions to what is often perceived as a near total abortion ban in that state. I read the article when it first came out. Why am I talking about this? The ministry of Passion Life is usually not focused at all on politics or current events. The concern of Passion Life is to equip the church to understand and deploy biblical ethics where abortion is most concentrated. I bring up this story because in obeying God and in applying what the Bible says, we often have to sift through cultural rhetoric in order to discern how God would have us to respond to the issues of our day. These 5 Texas women say that they were denied abortions in the face of horrific medical emergencies. We have linked to the story from NPR in the bio information here below. That story picked up a lot of national attention because it described a very anguishing medical situation, or a series of very anguishing medical situations that these 5 women were experiencing. And the story was written in such a way as to elicit an emotional response of sympathy for these women. And indeed, the circumstances are nothing that anyone ever wants to experience. I certainly felt sympathy for these women myself. We all should. I think that the article made people recoil at the idea that abortion was not readily available for the medical situations that they faced. And this is the clouding that the sympathy was indeed intended for, whereupon further reflection, the circumstances were not nearly as clear-cut as they were presented in the story to be. The Texas law, the article points out, is known as SB 8, and it enabled people in the state of Texas to file lawsuits against people who performed abortions, or to file lawsuits against people who help people obtain an abortion. And it includes, I'm reading from the article here, a quote, "The law includes limited exceptions for medical emergencies," end quote. First, let me point out that the bill does provide limited exceptions for medical emergencies. The article makes it sound as if the bill discompassionately does not allow for any exceptions of consideration, but it does. But the article goes on to describe a medical situation of one woman. Her name is Anna Zargarian, and this is what the article says. Zargarian's doctors denied her an abortion after her water broke at 19 weeks, too early for the fetus to survive. Fearing the prospect of severe infection, she flew to Colorado for a termination. Zargarian told NPR that she came forward because, quote, "It's important to share this story because someone is going to die eventually," end quote. Now, these stories turn my stomach in a knot. And again, I think that they should, because I have no desire to see a woman die unnecessarily. But as we look at the circumstances that are described here, we find that there is actually no medical argument for an abortion as the prescription for her circumstances. What do I mean by that? The article clearly says that her water broke at 19 weeks and that is too early for the fetus to survive and that there was a threat of severe infection. Number one, the statement that 19 weeks is too early for a fetus to survive the breaking of the water is a medically incorrect statement. What's being described here is known as preterm premature rupture of the membrane, or PPROM. And while it is a very serious complication, a baby can survive water breaking at 19 weeks. We have also linked in the bio section of this post a 2016 story from self.com. Now, let me assure you, self.com is no friend of conservative political or cultural thought at all. But in 2016, self.com posted an article about a woman whose water broke not at 19 weeks, but at 17 weeks. And through bed rest and good prenatal medical care, she was able to deliver a healthy baby in the 31st week of her pregnancy. The article describes that while PPROM is dangerous, it poses a risk of infection to the mother, it poses a fatal risk to the baby, but with technology and good doctoral management, in some, not all circumstances, it can be navigated. In other words, a doctor is not going to look at this circumstance and by default say, your prescription is to have an abortion. At the very least, a compassionate doctor who foresees an imminent death through a complication for the baby might suggest an early termination to the pregnancy as an option for the mother. But is an early termination the same thing as an abortion? While it might seem like splitting hairs, the medical answer is no. A medically assisted removal of a non-viable pregnancy, whether or not the baby has already expired or perished, is not the same thing as an abortion. What is the difference? The difference is intent. An abortion intends to kill a baby, almost always for the convenience of the mother or the family. A medically assisted removal of a non-viable pregnancy does not seek to end the life of a baby. It seeks to preserve the life of the mother. If the baby could be saved, in other words, that would be the preferable course of action. It's the same as with an ectopic pregnancy. An ectopic pregnancy is when the fertilized egg implants within the wall of the fallopian tube rather than in the wall of the uterus. This results in a non-viable pregnancy that is very, very dangerous. It poses an extreme risk to the life both of the mother and of the baby. If that baby continues to grow inside the fallopian tube, a rupture of the fallopian tube will result, and the life of the mother through hemorrhaging will be lost, and of course the life of the baby will also be lost. So this is a non-viable pregnancy, and if left unaddressed, it's going to cause death. When the baby is medically removed from the fallopian tube, the intent is not to kill the baby. The intent is to avert the death of both the baby and the mother. If medical science were advanced to the point that we could remove that baby from the fallopian tube and safely and reliably reimplant it within the wall of the uterus so that a healthy pregnancy resumed, that would be the preferential course of treatment. At this point, that is a medical impossibility. But brothers and sisters, rest assured, If the Lord does not come back for us before it happens, medical science will progress to the point where we are able to take that baby from the fallopian tube and reimplant it within the uterine wall. And when that happens, we will rejoice. And that will be the preferred method of dealing with ectopic pregnancies. In the case of an ectopic pregnancy, although the removal of that non-viable pregnancy is foreseen, although the death of the baby, in essence, is foreseen, it is not intended. And so it does not meet the criteria of abortion. Back to our story. When this woman, Anna Zargarian, when her water broke at 19 weeks, she and her doctors had a very complex decision to face. Either they could elect to manage the complication through bed rest, hospitalization, and a host of other medical technologies until the age of viability. Or, if the case were deemed extreme, where the death of both the baby was foreseen and imminent, they could elect to A, wait for the baby to expire under medical supervision, assuring that this was indeed a non-viable pregnancy and commence a medically assisted removal of the already expired baby. Or B, facing the threat of infection that would certainly take the life of the mother and the baby, they could commence a medically assisted removal of that non-viable pregnancy. In either case, the intent is not to kill the baby for some convenience. The procedure is not considered abortion. What we have here, again, brothers and sisters, is a very difficult case. And in these cases, we must understand what the Bible says. And we must be able to apply it carefully to that situation. When the Bible prohibits murder, or as is often worded in the scriptures, the shedding of innocent blood, it prohibits the intentional taking of an innocent human life. If it's not intentional, it's not murder. If you unintentionally and accidentally kill somebody with your automobile, that is a serious situation. The consequences can be very grave and the penalty can be very high, and often it should be. But it is not the same thing as intentional murder. You may be tried for and convicted of negligent manslaughter, but the penalty for manslaughter is not as high as it is for intentional murder. Again, intent matters. And it matters in the case of abortion. PassionLife advocates against the intentional killing of innocent human beings in the womb. We travel the world to help Christian leaders understand the Bible and help them lead well on the issue of protecting life and rescuing the vulnerable. With your partnership, we've already been to or made plans in 2023 to go to Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, Asia, Hawaii, Argentina, and other places already. And we are thankful for your partnership in the gospel. As the culture brings us these heart-wrenching stories of pregnancy complications that make it seem like abortion advocacy is a compassionate stand, look closely and think carefully and critically about the medical, ethical, and biblical implications. Abortion is never the prescription.